Hi, my name is Lauren.
Hi, Lauren. So what station are you training with right now?
Currently I am with Dry Creek Station 100 in Roseville.
Okay.
It's partnered with CAL FIRE.
So how long have you been training to be a firefighter?
8 months. Not very long, but it's hard work. It's not like easy, so it seems like forever.
With the training that you've done so far, have you been put in an emergency situation yet?
Yes, lots.
Lots of them.
Yes.
All right, would you consider those stressful for you?
Yeah, I mean, half of them are like, grandma can't get out of bed and they need, us to help her. And others are like, actually serious and you're like, oh crap, how do I shoot? And then you just forget everything and then you have to remember to just kind of work through it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Describe that oh shoot moment for us.
Well, so when we get dispatched, we hear, it's not a surprise. We know exactly what we're going to. But usually it's a lot worse than dispatch says it is. So when you show up, it's kind of like, you're like, oh my God. And you have no idea what to do. None. You're just like, uh-oh, crap. I don't remember anything. And then you kind of have to calm down for a second. And obviously you have like 2 seconds to calm down before you have to do something. But there's a lot of people there. So, when we show up, it's like usually 3 firefighters and then 2 paramedics or something. So everyone's working together. So if you freak out, there's other people to help, which is good. It's very good.
Yeah, that's great. All right. And so after that situation is over, how do you kind of cope with that stress?
Well, like for me, the easiest thing is to just forget about it. I mean, there's been a lot of times where I'm like, I don't know if this person is alive anymore. So it's kind of like you sort of just have to forget about it. I mean, you can wish all you want that they'll be okay and all this stuff, but like at the end of the day, you just really have to forget.
So my name is Ben Crew. I work for the Vallejo Fire Department. I've worked here for 3 years.
I'm Arthur Gonzalez. I work for the Vallejo Fire Department. I've been here 14 years.
Brandon Clay, Vallejo Fire Department, and I've been here for almost 3 years.
On a typical day, Ben, how many calls do you get?
So typical day here, we're running probably 12 to 14 calls. And then we're getting up, like last night we were up 4 times after midnight, so we probably got a couple hours of sleep.
And will you tell us about your responsibilities on those calls?
Yeah, we do. We provide emergency medical services. So the 3 of us respond on the engine, and we're all paramedics. And so we are typically getting on call or on scene a couple minutes before the ambulance company. So if it's an emergency medical call, then we provide any type of pre-hospital care that we can.
As a captain, is your role any different?
Yeah, so the responsibilities of the engine company. As a captain, I'm kind of overall scene control. So I'm watching out for seat safety, people coming out of the woodwork, making sure our crew is safe to where we can enter and do our job as first responders for whatever that incident may be, whether it's a structure fire, whether it's an EMS call, whether it's a vehicle accident. My first and foremost responsibility is the safety of my crew. Our engineer obviously gets us to the call safely. They drive the apparatus. They spot the apparatus. They set up to either use it for a structure fire or utilize the equipment off that apparatus, and then the firefighter's responsibility is going to be that EMS patient care. Whether it's triage of multiple patients or the initial patient care, whatever it may be, those are our initial responsibilities on those scenes.
So the calls that you get every day, how many of those calls are considered emergencies?
They're all considered emergencies. So kind of what we find though is, one person's emergency isn't necessarily another person's, and so as far as calls that, I guess, what's that?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
The types of emergencies that we get, it really depends on the socioeconomic status of the area. So the demographic changes throughout the city. So in our jurisdiction, in our district, we have a lower socioeconomic status of people within our district. So a lot of these people's only source of health care. So they utilize the ER a lot. They don't have any health care. They're on assistance and things of that nature. So their emergency, or what they call 911 for, is to us not necessarily an emergency. To them it's an urgent time, it's a stressful time, and they need help, so we're there to help them. But in a more affluent neighborhood, in a higher socioeconomic status, those people actually call for what they consider to be a true emergency. So that actual heart attack, or that actual respiratory arrest where somebody actually stops breathing, or somebody passes away, what we call a code. It really just depends on the area that we're at in jurisdiction within our city.
So if you could think for a minute about a really stressful emergency call that you've been on before, can you describe that feeling that you're experiencing at that time?
Anytime a child is involved, if it's a kid, everybody's just on high alert, and so nobody likes those calls, and so especially having a little girl now, it's everything hits real close to home, so those are always a real big deal.
Definitely. Okay. So after you kind of feel that stress in the situation and you might return to your firehouse, how do you cope with the stress?
So it really depends on the call. A lot of times, if it's a real, traumatic or gruesome scene, we'll sit down and we'll have a debriefing. And so if the ambulance company was involved, we might have them come over and have somebody kind of lead the discussion. And so then anybody could kind of voice concerns or feelings that they're having. On a typical call, we come back to the station and you kind of try to, me personally, I kind of try to turn it off.
Do you think that has gotten easier for you over time?
I think on some level it gets easier, but on some level it compounds. And so I'm able to kind of process things a little better. I don't go home necessarily thinking about every call that I've been on like I did at the beginning, but then I think over time you feel it compounded, and so there's calls that really stand out in your mind that maybe it's a year or two down the road and you still think about it once in a while, or maybe there's something in your personal life that for some reason triggers the memory, and so so then you're still dealing with it maybe years down the road.
Definitely. But talking about it does seem to help you.
Yeah, talking about it, and I think staying physically active and working out and taking care of yourself seems to help deal with the stress.
Does talking about it seem to help you cope with the stress, or do you have a different outlet for that?
I haven't really figured out the exact outlet, because I feel the stress in my life. It comes home, it builds, it culminates, it doesn't ever get released. So I'm haunted from the things that I've seen over 14 years here in the Vallejo Fire Department at different levels, whether it's babies that died in fires, or traumatic scenes that stick in your head, people trapped in vehicles and watching them take their last breath, to different types of stress. And it's not only the stress of the emergency calls, it's the stress of getting up in the middle of the night 3 or 4 times. It's the stress of being responsible for somebody else's life that's in your hands at this point. And talking about it helps, but talking about it to your peers only helps so much. And then you take it home and you try and explain it to your family, and they have no clue on what you're talking about because they haven't experienced the same thing. So there really isn't an outlet other than staying active, finding what works for you to relieve that stress, whether it's working out, whether it's finding a hobby, or you don't deal with it. There's a lot of alcoholism, there's a lot of drug use, there's a lot of different things that people utilize. And then there's a lot of people that just cover it up, and then one day it finally explodes. So it's difficult, and it's different for every person.
Right. And do you agree with Ben that it's gotten a little bit harder to deal with over time?
I think it gets harder to deal with because I think it all just accumulates. I think as you take these traumatic situations in, even if you deal with them and talk about them, they stay with you forever. Certain smells, certain sights, certain sounds will stick with you for the rest of your life. And it's the job you choose to take, and you knew it was dangerous when you took it, but you didn't realize how it would affect you going forward. for 30 years of doing this stuff.
What can you tell me about a stress disorder that someone might develop from being in a stressful profession?
Well, if it's a stressful profession where they're coming upon traumatic events, it's probably post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's the type of disorder where people have an emotional reaction to the trauma well after the trauma has passed. Typically, people will have flashbacks or memories of the trauma, will have physical reactions to the trauma well after the event, might have problems sleeping and concentration, and have some difficulties with their mood.
Would you think that this is common or likely for someone who would face this on a regular basis?
I think if someone experiences a trauma, I think stress is common. Whether or not it's post-traumatic stress disorder is a different ballgame. When you experience a traumatic event, it takes your brain a while to process the event and assign meaning to it. So a lot of times after a stressful event, people have a reaction for sometimes several weeks as their brain tries to process what happened.
How would you go about preventing or treating a stress disorder?
Preventing an adverse reaction to stress is much different than treating post-traumatic stress disorder. In general, the best way for people to deal with a stressful or traumatic event is to talk about it. For example, when first responders go into, let's say, an earthquake or a hurricane situation, one of the things that they're trained to do is encourage the people they come across to talk about what happened and to process it with them.